Welcome to today's episode of the Head of the Race podcast. Today we're going to be talking about the ninth stage of La Vuelta a España 2023. Today's episode is a bit later than it normally would be because I actually didn't watch the stage live. So imagine my shock when I saw what happened and basically just opened like any sort of social media platform because I have cycling almost on every single platform that I use. Basically, I went out with my parents because we had this new thing in our house and just wanted to see it. And also, after I came back home, I went out at like 1 p.m. and I came back at, I think it was like 6. And I had this huge, like, massive headache. I did not use my phone at all that night. I kind of watched some YouTube maybe a little bit, but I wasn't really on social media. I was so tired and dead that I kind of, didn't really process and didn't really look at what happened during the stage. So today I kind of turned the stage on, and I also really wasn't using my phone today that much as well because just felt really like tired and my head was still not feeling the best. So I kind of just turned on the stage and I was already like, what? And I had to, see what happened before. So I'm going to get into that. So this is why today's episode is a bit later than it would normally be because I normally watch the stage, maybe, I don't know, talk about it with my boyfriend or whoever I'm watching the stage with in particular. But, he's the only person that also knows a bit about cycling in like my closest circle. So I usually talk with him, and then I'll probably like set up and do my podcast. And also, hopefully there's gonna be no audio issues today because I was so mad last time when I recorded the pod and I turned it on and there was like this weird sound in the background, which I cannot hear in my headphones. And then on the audio itself, it was like just so annoying, and I'm so sorry for the inconvenience again. Hopefully it's not going to be here today. If it is, I don't know. I'm going to need to look into what maybe is causing it. I do not know. I didn't really change anything, so hopefully it was a one-time occurrence. But now I'm going to get into today's stage. Stage started in Cartagena and finished in Carvaza de la Cruz. It was another climbing stage. We love those. Also, we do love the sprints, but we love those especially. It was a stage that luckily today was a rest day, so my headache happened on the best day possible because I was able to rest, not look at social media. I literally watched the stage itself like an hour ago. I also kind of had some stuff to do today, so it was all like, today was a perfect day for like a rest day, so I could have this day to reorganize myself basically. So it was a stage before a rest day. So the riders, today they're not doing any cycling. I mean, they're cycling, of course, but they're not racing. And already before like anything happened during the stage, before we got any TV coverage, there was already stuff going on because we saw on Twitter basically that they was just, crazy wind. And because of the wind, echelons were forming, which I feel like if you're a new cycling fan, those are such a cool thing to see. And even if you're not a new cycling fan, those are always so exciting to see because, like, I just love to see those. It's so crazy how the riders adapt to different, weather situations and apply the tactics. I just thought it was so interesting to see. And before the coverage itself even started, we learned that there was basically an echelon with 12 riders, and it was like 6 Yamo guys. So it was like already crazy, but I'm going to get into that in a second. Basically, also, I saw on Twitter at Cycling Bottle. I hope this is fake, hopefully. I kind of screenshotted this. I did not fact check this right away, but hopefully it was like maybe it wasn't true. But I just want to throw this in. So a drama has been prevented in La Vuelta 2023. A car driver intentionally wanted to ride straight into the peloton in the final kilometers of stage 7. So basically 2 stages ago. He wanted to cause a big accident. The Spanish police could arrest him just in time. And I'm kind of like throwing this out there. Oh my god, this is so crazy. And also just talking about situations when it comes to drivers and cyclists. Usually, I live in Poland, so the situation is pretty bad because as a cyclist, it's really hard to use cycling lanes because they practically don't exist. And even if they exist, they're 2Ks long, 1K long, placed in really weird places, ending on random places. It's all just very messy. So I feel like the situation with drivers kind of unleashing their nerves on cyclists has been a reoccurring assurance, and I just always find that stuff to be so bizarre. I do not know what kind of person you have to be to want to hurt someone because of the fact that they're a cyclist. And that kind of just, brings me back to my own experiences when I've been honked at like crazy. Like, people scream at you, they honk at you, they drive like 100 kilometers per hour without any sort of gap between you and themselves. And I just, reading those kind of things makes me just so sad that we still as a society are dealing with these kinds of people that want to intentionally hurt a cyclist because they are furious about the fact that they have to go a little bit, slowly for 30 seconds of their life. When those 30 seconds that you're gonna lose, which I think is just so bizarre, like, on top of that, you can kill someone by not driving responsibly, and that has happened. There was a triathlon coach that died because he was ran over. I know like 2 people that died in the Polish triathlon world because they were hit by a car. It's just like, whenever I hear those things, I just get so mad. Because what kind of person do you have to be to have those instincts in you? There's also, like, when it comes to, like, I'm just gonna get into the topic for like a second. There also was some drama with like a cyclist here in Poland. Basically, the woman was pepper sprayed by the driver, and then he uploaded some videos of her riding her bike. It's all, a mess. She kind of was like, yeah, she was I feel like she was riding a bit unresponsibly, but he still was driving. It's just, because of the nerves and because of how this whole cyclist versus drivers situation has been growing, I feel like there's just going to be more dangerous situations happening. I just hope that we can all, as a society, basically stop this, because there's this weird agenda of drivers having this sort of vendetta on cyclists, and I hope that it can stop. I've personally had my fair share of unfortunate situations that I feel like were just, people being dicks. I guess you could say that. I feel like you could say that. And I really, really hope that this can stop, and I'm just over it. Like, we just, it's so crazy. Like, of course, people just don't get it. If you've never been a cyclist, you just don't get it that sometimes you are not going to be as reactive as a car, because if you brake too quickly as a cyclist, you might fall off the bike. It's all just, seeing perspective and kind of learning about different perspectives, and hopefully that can just kind of get resolved. And I hope that people start understanding that living as a cyclist is so crazy. Like, riding as a cyclist, especially when you're in a town, bike lanes are practically non-existent in a country like Poland. And when you're on the road, you get honked at, but when you're like on the sidewalk, you get yelled at for riding on the bike on the sidewalk where people are walking. It's like everyone has their thing to say. So I feel like hopefully this can get resolved somehow, especially in a country like Poland. I wish there were just more bike lanes and more knowledge about the fact that we're kind of treating ourselves really poorly as humans, and I don't feel like it's normal that people just want to, hurt themselves and hurt each other. Hopefully this can stop, but it's like a side thing I wanted to say because I read that tweet and it got me thinking about this whole thing, this whole like weird dynamic that exists, and it's kind of socially acceptable to be addicted to cyclists. I know that cyclists sometimes can be, I would kind of say, posers. That may sound I feel like also another side rant when it comes to being a cyclist. I feel like people are so judgmental to others when cycling is such a beautiful thing. You can, as long as someone is on a bike, riding the bike with a helmet on, of course, but they don't need any equipment. They can use what's comfortable for them. They can ride in a way that's comfortable for them. As long as they're on a bike, I feel like that's so amazing, and that just, it's amazing to see the community grow. And I just feel like sometimes people are just so unnecessarily hateful, and they kind of feel like, I'm better at that, I know more than you, instead of trying to help people and instead of trying to grow the community as much as possible. So hopefully, I've also had a fair share of interactions with people who think that because they've been on their bike longer, or because they have this fucking cool stuff, a 30K like PLN, I don't know, dollars, not dollars, but like 30,000 zloty, sorry, zloty, because they have that, they have this weird privilege of just letting their mind take over and their egos take over. So hopefully that also stops. I feel like you're as valuable as someone on a $2 bike as well as on a 20K bike. So hopefully the community starts to grow and people are more nice to each other, because I feel like sometimes people just don't want to let people in and want to be unnecessarily hateful. And this is just a rant. I might talk about these kind of stuff on my podcast as well, because of course the cycling season is not everlasting. I might talk about F1, Monza happened this week. It was all crazy, and then Ferrari's doing Ferrari things, but those two sports are not always on. So I might talk about different things in the cycling world, my thoughts on different things. We might get into different sports, but this is just a kind of a side rant. That's all I wanted to say. But when it comes to the stage itself, we had Echelons forming, like I said, crazy wind. Jumbo-Visma had their team just in a huge group right into the front. But when it comes to the jerseys, because I kind of forgot myself, I was like looking for Ayuso in the white jersey. I was like, he's not in the white jersey. I looked for him for like 10 kilometers, and he wasn't even in the white jersey. I was like, yeah, there's 3 UAE guys, but where is Ayuso? He was there, you dumbass. But what can you do? So we have Sepp Kuss in the red jersey. Shout out Sepp Kuss in the red. Keaton Groves, still the leader of the sprint classification. Sepulveda in the King of the Mountains jersey, and Lenny Martinez in the white jersey. And with like 180 kilometers to go, there was some sort of mechanical problem from Geraint Thomas. I feel like this Vuelta has just been... He said in an interview not like that long ago that he hated his experience at the Vuelta in like 2015. I feel like he's hating this as well. Like, he's hating this. I feel like it's just suffering. He has not been looking great. He had a crash. He had like 2 crashes. I feel like I don't know how many crashes he's had at this point, but I just feel like he's hating this. So 180 Ks to go, just around that. Jumbo-Visma is pulling in the peloton, and there's echelons forming. And because of that, the fact that they're in the front, that is allowing them to create the leading echelon, which is, of course, the best situation for you, because you're not getting dropped behind. There's crazy wind and stuff happening behind you, and you're controlling. Basically, that group, I'm going to read out the most important people, but I feel like there were so many important names in this leading group. Remco Evenepoel with Cataneo, which I feel like has been killing it this Vuelta and just, this season, so shout out to him. Primož Roglic, Wilco Kelderman, Sepp Kuss, Jan Tratnik, Valtteri Attila, Dylan van Barle, Jonas Vingegaard, and then we had, I feel like Lasso was pretty important too. Maybe Buchmann. I feel every single one of these guys is like important, but I'm just trying to stick to a story. Then Soler kind of like bridged to that group, and Movistar was left behind, so they were doing some work in the back because like they were pretty in like a pretty bad situation because their GC guy Moss is left behind, so they have to try and bridge to that group. Also Bahrain were pulling because their rider was isolated in the front. It was I don't remember who it was actually. I don't remember who it was. So I didn't write it down. I kind of wrote down the Jumbo Visma guys, but I didn't write down the Bahrain guy. I'm sorry, I don't know who it was. It definitely wasn't Landa. So I don't know who could have been. I don't know. I really don't. Okay. And then Walter was dropped from that first group because he had a flat. So he basically kind of had to, work his way back later, but he actually did. But like, he got dropped from that very first group. And that group, at some point, they had like a 40-second lead. So I was like, we're not seeing the coverage. We got coverage at like, I don't know, 90 Ks to go maybe. And that was happening at like 150 kilometers to go. So that was really exciting. It was like, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Because Quickstep and Jumbo were working because they thought like, this is great. Well, of course we can like, stick. For example, this is what I think. They're thinking, yeah, we can, work with, so when you're in an echelon, you're kind of forced to work because if you're not working, it's all not going to work out well and you're probably also going to drop. I feel like it's kind of a situation when you're in an echelon, you're kind of forced to work. I feel like that is true. But, basically, so they're thinking probably we're going to work with Jumbo, with Quickstep, whilst we're dropping a guy like Martinez, we're dropping UAE. So, of course, that's like Almeida and Ayuso that like we're getting rid of. And they're missing Moss. So Moss, like, this is a perfect situation for them. I feel like those three are the most important ones that they wanted to kind of get rid of in that scenario, like Ayuso, Almeida, and Moss, because Martinez is not as dangerous in GC, but still. And also I feel like Soler, I don't know if he actually bridged to our group by then, but Soler, of course, and he's pretty close to Kuss on GC, which I don't feel like the jersey is at risk by Soler, but still, they're thinking probably maybe we can use this situation and cause also some chaos in the peloton by doing this, because we're kind of creating a situation where the teams in the back are forced to do some work whilst we're kind of, it's all also I feel like kind of mind games, not only trying to get some time, but I feel like you're kind of making them nervous, you're kind of making them regroup, I guess. So I feel like that might also be part of it. And then their group got caught, but it took them some time. It was like 15K that it took them to catch them, which is energy, of course. I'm just thinking. And then there was an attack and a breakaway ended up forming, and that breakaway had Kemna in it, which when he's in that breakaway, it's going down, because that man can win from a breakaway. Like, he's just so good at breakaway wins and kind of planning out his efforts and how he attacks in different situations. I feel like he's a very smart rider. I feel like he can really measure his efforts and when he attacks, how he should attack. I just, when I saw that he's in a breakaway, and then I saw that the breakaway had a pretty good gap, I was like, I feel like this is really good for him. Also, that group kind of like, there were also like people bridging over to that group, and it formed into like a few guys. I remember there was definitely Sobrero in that breakaway from Jaco Alula. There was Hamilton from DSM in that group. Who else was in that group that I can like really recall? There were some EF riders. There was I think there was like Fernandez from Cofidis, but I do not remember. It was like around 100K to go. Basically, this is, the breakaway has formed, and they gain a lot of time. They gain quite a bit of time. They have like 7 minutes with like 80 Ks to go. And now we have coverage with like, I think it was like 90 Ks to go. We start having coverage. And basically another echelon situation happening. And in that echelon, in that like front group, I guess, I'm gonna open, okay, that front echelon, the team that missed out the most was Groupama, because they basically had only one rider who wasn't their important rider, I guess, because they need a Martinez in that echelon group. Of course, great, they have a rider there, but they don't have their leader. So they were basically forced to work trying to close the gap to that front group, because that echelon that basically was created in the front was another GC echelon. It was Walter, Vingegaard, Kuss, Roglic. Then it was Ayuso, Almeida, and Soler from UAE. Then we had Cataneo, Evenepoel, and Seri. We had Oliveira, Mas, and Rubio. We also had Vlasov in there, I think, Carthy. So basically all the important GC guys are in that front echelon. So you just, you have to be in there if you don't want to lose unnecessary time. What if the gap, because echelons are the most like crazy situation where any sort of gap, a small gap, can turn into like this huge time loss when you're like, you blink and you've lost like a minute because of the crazy wind and the gaps created. So I feel like it was one of those situations when Groupama was kind of like, fuck, we gotta close this immediately, or else we're gonna be, in a pretty bad situation for a guy like Martinez, when he cannot lose this kind of time on a stage like this where, the TT is coming up and he's not going to go fast on the TT. So why lose that unnecessary time, basically? And then 73 Ks to go. The echelons were like full on, going crazy. Jonas was pretty far in the back. There was even like a situation with like 70 Ks to go where he kind of got dropped for like a tiny bit. Like he was maybe not dropped, like there was a bit of a gap and he had to close that gap. I think he had like Soler on his wheel. The wind was just doing whatever the wind wanted to do today. Like it was just all crazy today, and it was like, one of those stages which I feel like you can watch, because it was so like, it was theatrics, like insanity, just absolutely insane. Kind of like the echelons and the work, it was just so crazy to see. I loved watching that stage today, so it was a nice one to watch, definitely. So if you haven't watched it, watch it. I just loved it today. Then that group created, and they had like Groves in it, and it had a bunch of people, and basically they were also like riding, they were working together, they were like, Jumbo was really, putting the freaking hammer down. Even Quickstep, like they were like working, like they were feeling like working today. And I feel like it was just, I don't know, I can't even express it with words. It was just so cool to see, like the way that the riders were acting, like how the echelons were forming. I feel like when it comes to like the teams, Jumbo was going really fast, but they were kind of more easy to work with when it comes to positioning, because they basically created the echelon on like the whole road, where I feel like when Quickstep was in front, they kind of shrank the echelon. It wasn't as easy to stay. I feel like they kind of weren't as easy to work with as when like a team like Jumbo, when Quickstep was kind of, like they were kind of shrinking the echelons. They kind of weren't willing to go all like throughout the street. They kind of wanted to make sure that not everyone can, hang on. They were kind of messy for that, but so it was definitely cool to see. And there were like 50 something Ks to go. You can see Remco and Primož kind of, talking to each other, like, what we're going to do here, because it's, one of those situations when you're like, they had basically Martinez chasing in the back with Groupama, trying to close the gap. And at that point, there weren't really echelons really forming, because they, were kind of in the forest, and it wasn't as open, and the wind maybe died. I don't feel like the wind died down, but it was just not open field. And they were talking to each other like, what do you think we should do? Because you don't have a great situation either. You kind of don't have Rumbarla. You don't have, I think Walter wasn't, maybe Walter wasn't there. I don't know. But, you don't have that much helpers like domestiques. Also, Branko didn't have that many either. So, they were like talking to each other like, what you're going to do? Like, you're going to waste energy like pulling for cuss, or what do you want to do? Maybe like this is what they were talking about. 55 Ks to go. Quickstep was, working in the front. Groupama still trying to close that gap because by then they were like a minute behind. And then, because even though he's in the red jersey, he's still one of the best teammates. He was, pouring some water on Walter. He was just being the nicest guy ever because he's the nicest guy ever. And then at some point, I was like, Jonas, at like one point, he was like really high up in the front. I feel like this is when the teams kind of decided, like, we're just gonna wait. This is a pointless situation. I feel like we can just wait for the group in the back. And they waited 50 Ks to go. The group, Pama, Train, and all the other riders basically catch up. Dylan Barbarla comes to the front, pretty close to the descent. He's working in the front right before the descent, so it's like, position, trying to make sure that, just looking at the descent, I didn't really get into it, but I feel like it was pretty technical and pretty, dangerous. Also, just when it comes to the weather today, I feel like it was important to have a good position, kind of protect your leaders, not get into unnecessary situations when you're risking, a slip or maybe some, sand on the road that might cause the rider to get injured or fall and have a crash. So I feel like, this is one of those descents when it's so important to stay as safe as possible. And you could see that the team, like the peloton kind of, they weren't going as hard because by then the gap started to, really go down. Like they weren't chasing. It was like 40 Ks to go. And it was obvious by then, to me at least, that they were not going to catch the peloton. The breakaway basically. And also then we saw like footage of what the hell the freaking finish line looked like. It was a bit like a few hours earlier, but it was just mud. The whole the banners were like they fell down. It was like windy and there was fog and it was just a freaking mess. So I was like, oh, that's amazing. Love that. They're going to be going absolutely tired, absolutely dead. You can barely see. You have fog in front of your eyes and you're kind of like, oh, what the hell is going on? I'm trying to, bridge this gap. I'm trying to attack and you have to worry about fucking not slipping on the road because someone decided this is a perfect place to finish a freaking World Tour race. So yeah, love that for them. So by then you could just see with 20 Ks to go, the gap, yeah, I feel like it was 5 something minutes. It was 5:30 maybe. It was the gap definitely, increased from that 50K moment. So basically with 20 Ks to go, you could see that the gap kind of increased from the 40K moment increased to 5 minutes. And then with 8 kilometers to go, Kemna, it was so funny to see on the TV. He wanted to attack, but then he got blocked because he wanted to attack before the turn, just kind of throw his competitors off. It's the nice, because they can't really, attack immediately because there's a turn right away. So I feel like it was he tried to make it strategic, but it, it kind of maybe not backfired, but he wasn't able to do it. I was kind of funny, but I'm not gonna, And 8 Ks to go, Hamilton attacks. He reduces the breakaway group to a few riders, but then they basically bridge right away to him. And we have 6 Ks to go for the breakaway. That's when the peloton arrives at the bottom of the climb. And Movistar was in the front. And that's when I started to think, this is a pretty maybe I could see like a Moss win on this stage actually, and I was like thinking maybe they wanted him to win. Maybe I feel like it was possible. And but it was like the two movie star guys. I think Soler. Maybe he was like pretty high up. Maybe I'm actually not sure who it was. Then we had probably Cataneo because he's been like glued to Remco's hip this Vuelta. And then we had Remco, and behind him was Primož, and Jonas was a few places back on the bottom of the climb. And that's when we learned that the time was going to be taken 50 meters before the 2K to the banner without any bonuses at the finish or anything like that. So that's when we knew that there's probably not going to be a fight when it comes to, the finish. They're probably not going to be chasing the breakaway. But we still didn't know whether the GC guys are going to be racing each other, and if they actually knew that the finish was kind of like, the time was taken at the 2K mark. Because we've seen with Remco, he did not know that he was like finishing, like that he was sprinting for the win a few stages back. So we're kind of like we had second thoughts if they know that the time is taken at 2K, because sometimes the riders just don't know these things. So I was kind of curious. I feel like they knew but kind of didn't. It was, I don't know, I feel like they did know. At first I didn't think they knew because Almeida attacked at one point, and I thought maybe he doesn't know, but then I feel like they did actually know that the time was taken at that 2K mark. Maybe a bit later though. And with like 5Ks to go, Kemna attacks. He just, by that point, he's just gonna go solo. You can see he drops Sobrero. He was the last one that was kind of, he had a chance of basically being able to maybe respond to the attack, but he dropped them with that 5K mark round, I would say. And 4Ks to go, Caneo goes to the front. Like I said, he's been glued to Remco's hip this whole Vuelta. He's been doing amazing work for him. I feel like, one of those domestiques that sometimes we complain that Remco doesn't have amazing support, that he doesn't have the strongest team, but I feel like Cataneo has been just, kind of carrying him. Like, maybe, sorry, that sounds like he's carrying him, but like, he's been carrying the team this Vuelta, just kind of the best helper of the team. Personally, I think he's been just looking really strong and kind of knowing what he needs to do. When it comes to like teammates and stuff, sometimes there are teammates who this is why I think a team like Ineos is kind of, hurting, because you need a person, I'm not saying this is Cataneo, but kind of like a side thing. Sometimes you need a rider who is going to be, per se, hated by other riders, but loved by you. There's a Polish channel that talks about football, basically like translating their name. It's a sports channel. It's called Kanał Sportowy. And they invited Michał Kwiatkowski on their, YouTube TV show thing, and they asked him, who was the rider who you would say as a competitor you hated racing against, but you love him on your own team? And he said Luke Rowe. He's kind of like the guy who can, push when he needs to, get good position, kind of control it. And I feel like this is a really important thing for teams, where this is why I think Ineos is kind of non-existent in the race. I don't feel like they have the guy who can kind of, push around when he needs to, kind of shove something, maybe, or he needs to, take control in certain situations. And this is like a fact about Luke Rowe, that he's kind of one of those riders where you just love to have the kind of guy like him on your team. He's, you just love to have him on your team because you feel like he always has your back, and he's just really good when it comes to like working for his leaders. That was kind of like a thing I just threw here. And like I said, Cataneo working at the front, really good work from him. And we don't really see much from the peloton. I mean, like the GC group until like 2Ks to go. they just showed us a bunch of Kemna, how he was, doing work at the front. By then, it was kind of, I didn't feel like Sombrero was going to catch him. He got like a 15-second gap on him, and it wasn't really, going down. Then there's like this attack by Almeida and Vlasov, which for them probably was like 4Ks maybe to like the time, 4Ks to the top, but two-ish Ks to like the point where they were taking the time. And they attacked, they're kind of, went way together. And with 800 meters to the finish by the front group, that sounded so messy, but basically Primož attacked. He gapped Remco and Moss, and also Jonas. He got dropped a little bit, but I feel like it wasn't, maybe he did drop him, but I feel like he still kind of, had control. I feel like Primož, he even said in an interview after that he had good legs today, and he just, wanted to maybe take some seconds off. And they kind of rode behind each other for like a few seconds, and there was like this whole drama because basically they took time next to like two cones, basically. And Primož at first got 2 seconds, but there's like a rule in the UCI books that a rider needs to be under a second, and the riders basically kind of all crossed that line within a second, and they all gave them the same time. But it's just another one of those weird situations where the Vuelta has these weird bits and like where they kind of mess up on these things that should be really easy for them, which I feel like I don't know why they're doing this, kind of just weird. But so they ended up getting the same time after some time. The Vuelta, basically like the team at Vuelta, but they adjusted it and they all got the same time. And that was the right thing to do. Remco kind of went to the front at some point, and there was like this weird part in the race when they crossed that 2K, line. Almeida and Vlasov got like a few seconds maybe on Primož, Remco, Jonas, and Moss. Using that group, and they kind of crossed the line while Kamna was he was dying, of course, like he's trying to win a freaking Vuelta stage, and the guys in the back are just chilling. There was like Vlasov talking to like Moss, just riding to the top, kind of like having a laugh. So really interesting to see. But I was so worried for Kevin. I was like, this guy's going so fast. They had like a safety protocol, but he, he's still going really fast. Like, I was so worried for him that maybe he's gonna slip or something's gonna happen. But luckily, thank God, nothing happened. But it was really interesting to see. It was like that. It was like the weirdest sight, because normally these guys are like racing. This is not a sprint or something. Because you're kind of used to the sight of riders, casually crossing the line in the sprint stage. But this was like a mountain stage. So this was so bizarre to see them just like kind of like crossing the line, or just chatting and like looking at each other, having a laugh. Funny. When it comes to the GC, of course, is still the leader of the race. Love that for him. Tomorrow we have a TT. Finally, the freaking TT I've been talking about for like the past week. We finally have it. It is a 25.8 kilometer TT. It's a pretty flat TT with like a tiny, like not even a hill. It's not even a hill. It's like a tiny bit, like a little bit up. Like a literally nothing, basically, in the middle. I feel like this is probably gonna be Remco Regana for sure. If anyone else wins, I'm gonna be surprised. Like, I'm gonna be surprised. And when it comes to who's gonna win whatever, it's rather we're all gonna be looking at the clock. What time is gonna be basically taken away in the GC? What kind of gap is Remco going to create between him and Jonas and Primož and Moss, and Kuss, of course, he's in the leader's jersey, if he wants to keep that jersey, he's gonna have to ride a lifetime TT, like freaking like best performance of your life TT. So I'm really excited. I'm really excited to see that TT, because I just want to have that kind of out of the way, and then after that TT, when we know the only sort of time gaps that are going to be created by now are going to be just purely on like mountain stages. So I'm really excited to see what we're going to be dealing with for those next 2 weeks of the Vuelta, those last 2 weeks. Hopefully it's not going to be too crazy, because I don't want to have that, closing, like we're not going to be able to make this back kind of gap. But I don't know, I feel like when it comes to my predictions, I might not be surprised when Jonas doesn't lose that much. I might be reaching here, because he has not looked amazing. I feel like he hasn't been, as strong as he normally would be on a Grand Tour. He's kind of like been dropping and kind of, not looking as strong as he normally would look. But I feel like he might not lose as much time as we expect him to. Because I've seen people say he's going to lose like 40 seconds or he's going to lose like 50 seconds. I feel like he might not. I feel like he might actually not. Pretty much might lose around the same time or a bit more. Actually, wouldn't be surprised as well. Mas is probably going to lose some time. Martinez going to lose some time. Kus is probably, lose some time. I hope it's not too much. Hopefully, he has a 43-second lead on Soler and the GC. But when it comes to the GC, like, main guys, so I'm going to read out, like, the top 10, I guess. So we have Kus on 43 seconds in front of Soler. Then we have Martinez with the 102 loss. And Venepool is fourth with 222. So quick math, he's got like 140. So basically Kus has 139. Hopefully my math is correct. I don't know. I'm freaking awful at math. So he has, around 139 on Remco, which hopefully he does a good TT. Like, I want him to see, I want him to keep the red, hopefully. Then we have Landa on 229, Roglic on the same time as him, and Vingegaard 233, so he's basically 4 seconds behind Primož, and 11 seconds behind Evenepoel. So I'm really excited just have those gaps behind us, basically. Ayuso is at 2:43, so that's 21 seconds behind Remco. And hopefully he does as good of a TT as he did at, was it Tour de Suisse? I think it is. I think it was. I don't know. But basically he did a really good TT there. I think he might actually come with a really good TT. And basically this is it for today's stage. And for tomorrow's stage. Tomorrow's podcast might not be as long because it's a TT, but today I kind of got my thoughts out. And tomorrow, let's see, I'm actually going to look at the map. Yeah, it's got a few turns actually. I'm going to be a bit more technical. Oh, okay, I'm going to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's got a few turns here. Interesting, but it also has like a pretty long straight moment. So, but I'm really excited. The TT starts in Valladolid. Oh my god, I just butchered that. Valladolid. Oh my god, I cannot say this. This is a really hard name of town. But, tomorrow we're going to have the TT out of the way. I'm just going to see the, the realistic gaps for the rest of the 2 weeks and the mountains. So, really excited. I actually do not know who's going to win this Vuelta. It's so crazy. Normally, you might, have a prediction of, like, the Tour. It's either Pogacar or Jonas, by, like, a week. And you're like, it's going to be one of the two. But here, it can be Jonas, it can be Primož, it can be Remco, it can be Ayuso, it can be just a bunch of people. So I'm really, maybe even Kus. I'm counting on him to do something here. And, I don't know. But still, really excited. So hopefully you enjoyed today's podcast, and you're going to listen to tomorrow's episode. And yeah, Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you for tomorrow's after TT